And good morning, and welcome to the Skinny for Friday, May 15th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined, as always, by my partner here on the show, Ray Rowe, editor-in-chief of Creative Loafing Newspaper. Hey, Ray.
Good morning, Mitch. How's it going? Chaotic, fantastic energy right before we came on the air. That's awesome.
It's always great seeing the down and dirty folks as we walked out.
They look like a gang now that there's so many of them.
I know. Is DeMaio and Vic now like a regular on this show?
I think so, maybe. Yeah. He's even got a videographer, Louis Salazar, in
yes.
there.
But I'm doing fantastic. It's a great day. Not so much humidity out there, so it's really great out there today.
Extended spring.
So we're going to have a really exciting show. I guess our listeners will be the ones to judge that. A couple of headlines, by the way, before we get into our guest today. Of course, we've talked a lot about the congressional redistricting map. We've got our first big Republican announcing who's going to challenge Democrat Kathy Castor here in Congressional District 14. That's Pasco County Republican Representative Kevin Steele, who is the wealthiest man in the legislature. Some of you might recall he was at one point a candidate for CFO in the Republican primary against Blaise Ngolia, and then he dropped out, and now he's back in. He doesn't actually live in the district, by the way. You don't have to be officially to run for Congress or even represent your district in Congress. I noticed that the press release he said about all his Tampa roots, because that district is still partly is in Tampa. And another issue too for listeners, I think I care a lot about the island of Cuba. So I don't know if you've seen this, Ray. Basically, Cuba is like ran out of oil. Okay, correct. It's really scary there. I know that we've got the CIA director down there today. They're talking about indicting Raul Castro, who is no longer officially in power there. Anyway, developments I think are very interesting for our listeners. Okay, so we've got a couple, like I said, a couple great guests. One in the studio here is a reporter who has been around for longer than I have in the Tampa Bay area, and he is there. Let me introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Steve Newborn.
Oh, wait, hold on. Let's get his mic on, for God's sake.
Hi, I'm Steve Newborn, WUSF Public Radio.
Yes, Steve Newborn from WUSF.
It's not the Twilight Zone, people.
Yes, he actually, you're not on 89.7, you're on 88.5, but we've got Steve Newborn in, and I'm really excited to have Steve in the studio with us. And also joining us right now for the top of the program here, we have got, we're going to be talking about the issues of growth management, development, which are something I know so many Floridians care about, and that is the situation, especially down in Manatee County. We've got Manatee County Commissioner George Crews joining us via Zoom. Good morning, George.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Hey, great to have you here with us. And just to set people up, if they're not familiar with what's been going on in Manatee County, obviously you live there, you're very aware. But why I think George is so interesting to talk to about the issues of growth management, development, et cetera. There was a really polarizing vote in October of 2023 in Manatee County. That's when the Manatee County Commission voted 5-1 in favor of reducing wetland protections. And the one commissioner who voted against that was Commissioner Crews. And what's so interesting is that had such reverberations down there. And by that, I mean, there was, so the voting in support were Commissioners Kevin Van Ostenbridge, James Satcher, Mike Ron, Amanda Ballard, and Jason Bearden. So in the 2024 election, Van Ostenbridge and Satcher were defeated by their opponents. Bearden is up this year, but she's already announced she's not going to run again. Now, Ray Turner did not vote in that race. He lost also in 2024 because he was tied with the majority. And then we'll see about a couple of the other commissioners who are currently on the ballot. So I guess let's start with that, if we could, Commissioner Crews. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that was all about? Because it just seems like that was such a really significant development in Manatee County in recent years.
Sure, and it was significant for two reasons. One, just the obvious one, that wetlands are important, and we need to protect them at all cost, and we had reasonable buffers in place. But I think the reason it was more important, though, the reason it reverberated to the ballot box, is because everywhere in the state of Florida, Manatee County is no exception, and probably more at the forefront of it than anything, is this perception that people are buying votes. People are influencing policy decisions from the outside. And this was such an egregiously obvious attempt by a few special interests to get their way. This, mind you, these wetland buffers were contested in court twice by a developer. And both times, not just in the regular court, but in the appellate court, we won. Like there was an attempt for years to win this in court by the developers so they can have a few more feet of development rights, and they kept losing. So rather than take the proper channel of advocating in court, they decided to stack a board and use their influence to get it done. So I think that's why it was more, not just because it was wetlands and environment, which is important to everybody here as a coastal community, but because it was one of the clearest examples of what everyone was accusing people of doing, which was buying policy, and this was just so blatant.
Well, and again, we should tell our listeners you were first elected in 2020 and then again re-elected just a couple years ago in 2024. Interesting, George, you talk about the political ramifications of that. You had worked with Anthony Pedicini, who is basically considered the GOP political consultant in Florida, along with his partner Tom Piccolo in 2020, like so many Republicans did. And then you broke ties with him. You did not work with him in 2024, and you were quoted as saying, quote, political consultants have destroyed this place. Can you talk a little more about that?
Look, I'm one of those politicians. I know everyone says it, but I'm not a big fan of politics. I like policy. That's probably why you have me on here. It's why I'm in Tallahassee so much. I just believe that the best people throughout the state, at every level of the state, from federal to state to local, aren't necessarily winning. People are winning based on excess funds and campaigns. They're winning based on trending as far right or as far left, depending on where you are. And that's what political consultants are paid for. They're paid to con people into voting for their clients, and they get paid to do it. You see political consultants refuse to allow their candidates to debate. They send out misleading and in some cases blatantly false mailers to try to do it. You're seeing it in Kentucky right now with Massey, actually.
Thomas Massey, who's opposed Donald Trump,
Correct. So I just believe we would have we'd have better representation if we actually just let everybody get on a ballot and advocate for what they truly believe instead of lying to people through text message and mailers. And that's what political consultants do. There's a right and a wrong way to be a consultant, mind you. I mean, someone has to know where to order the signs, and people need to be able to do their research. It's hard to be a one-man show when you're campaigning. My wife and I ran my 24 campaign by herself. It was exhausting. So I'm not refuting the profession of political consulting. I'm just refuting that there are some political consultants that are managers and help, and there are some political consultants that manipulate things for their clients.
Now, I understand that the Manatee County Commission is close to approving a referendum that will be on the ballot this fall that would allow Manatee to protect more environmentally sensitive lands. And yet I was reading, Commissioner Cruz, that that Manatee overwhelmingly supported a similar plan in 2020, which allowed the county to bond up to $50 million. So if you passed it then, why do you have to have another measure this year?
It was poorly written in 2020. 2020, 71% of people voted for it because people are sick of overdevelopment and they want protected lands. You see that every place it goes on a ballot, from Lake County, Sarasota County, you name it. Our ballot initiative in 2020, unfortunately, capped our bonding capacity at $50 million. We have now bonded $50 million. We still have the millage. People are more than happy to pay that millage because they're more than happy with what we're doing with it. But it had a few things that needed to be tweaked, one of which is the millage being paid, 0.15, is high enough to allow larger bonding, but we're prohibited by that referendum in 2020 from doing so to purchase more land. Second, it restricted us to direct acquisition, whereas we're finding, as is the case, that you could protect much more land through conservation easements than you ever could by purchasing the land. And that previous referendum prohibited that. So I try to propose this in early 2024. I try to get on the 2024 ballot to increase our bonding capacity to some TBD amount. I threw out $250 million because that matched Sarasota. Maybe our millage doesn't support that. Maybe it's $150. But I proposed this in 2024 and unfortunately did not have the votes of my board at that time, the same board that voted for the wetlands, to put this on the ballot. So we're trying again this year. I've been working with Trust for Public Lands and a few others. We have a much different board now, and I have no doubt in my mind that this board will vote unanimously to put something on the ballot. And I honestly have no doubt in my mind that the citizens of Manatee County will vote in favor of it.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to Skinny here. We're speaking with Manatee County Commissioner George Cruz, talking about growth management, so many issues with development. George Cruz, you talked about, you were very much into the issue, of course, of housing. That's why we did see you up in Tallahassee during the session following certain legislation. And you have a Substack page, and you write a lot about this. I looked at your Substack back from last November. You wrote a piece called Smart Growth Does Not Equal No Growth. Let me just read a little excerpt there. You wrote that right now our growth plan is more reactive than proactive. We have we hear about the 65,000 unbuilt zoned homes in Manatee County. That's a lot of new housing, but if we're not providing proper services and employment centers, we're just creating cheap housing alternatives for people who will clog our roads driving elsewhere for work, services, and entertainment. That's why planning matters, and planning to build nothing is neither a plan nor a solution. So whether you can talk about Manatee County or overall, because I know you follow what's going on throughout the state here. How do you feel about how the state handles or doesn't handle this issue? Because it seems like every year they're proposing more legislation that takes away power from local governments like you when it comes to issues like on development.
Sure, I do not like how they're handling it because, again, going back to the original discussion we had about buying policy, the policies that are currently coming out of the state are favoring large developers. There's lots of talk about blue ribbon and ag enclaves and, continuous opportunity to sprawl, which is very cheap for developers to do. And then simultaneously, they pass bills and attempt to pass bills that restrict our ability to collect impact fees so that growth pays for itself. So what they're proposing is allow somebody to build as of right 15,000 acres someplace and then stick it on the current taxpayers to have to pay for the roads, the libraries, the parks, the infrastructure, the pipes to get it there because the impact fees that they're paying are insufficient. I've been advocating for, and a good group of us have, and honestly, a lot of people in Tallahassee, a lot of the representatives and senators have also been advocating for smarter growth. And that includes some of the bills that you kind of alluded to this year, like the Starter Home Act and the Transit-Oriented Development Act and the ADU bill. Those are the proper way of doing things. Those are putting infill locations where infrastructure already exists, where we have less concern about the impact fees. But those don't get the same attention in Tallahassee because nobody building a single duplex is donating enough money to get any traction up there. It's the person who wants to build the 1,000-unit apartment complex as of right without having to go in front of the public.
You mentioned the starter home bill. I know you were helping advocating for that. That did not get through this year, the legislature. That talked about, I think, lot size, right? And I know I was at the Jeff Brandes, the Florida Policy Project, had a all-day seminar a few weeks ago on housing. He does it every year, the last few years since Senator Brandes left the legislature. And there was one discussion part where I wrote about it for the Phoenix. I think Creative Loafing actually posted it, and it was about lot size and about some. I think the title of the discussion was "Size Matters," and it was kind of using the old John Morgan phrase there. But I wrote it, and in fact, Creative Loafing put it on the Facebook page, and I saw a lot of actually criticism from people who on the Facebook page who were saying this is not the right way to go. And I don't really know where people. I didn't read all their comments, like where they were critical of that. But I believe you believe in this, right? Like they were talking about lot size there and smaller lot size.
I believe there should be no minimum lot size. Mm-hmm. I believe the biggest problem we have with our housing right now is over government regulation. It started with Euclidean zoning way back in the day, which was basically put in place to keep certain people out of their own neighborhood, and it just got worse from there. The regulations at government at every level are done for the sole purpose of making things cost prohibitive for people that they don't want near them. So, minimum lot sizes, I think, is the easiest and probably most beneficial thing we can do right now. Because if you look at my surplus land list in Manatee County, we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of quote unquote non-conforming lots that we just sit on because nobody can build on it. But if I get rid of that and I still have setbacks and I still have, area ratios and I still have all these other restrictions, and if someone can somehow take a 2,000 square foot lot and find a way of putting a 500 square foot tiny home on there for a family or for an individual to have a safe roof over their head, and they're still adhering to all the other setbacks, that 500 square foot lot is not impacting my utilities. It's not impacting my infrastructure. It's not overburdening a school in the area. It doesn't affect anyone's life except for the person who moved into it. Now extrapolate that across 5,000 more non-conforming lots scattered throughout the entire county. Now I'm creating meaningful housing without impacting anybody in terms of the impacts of growth because they're scattered evenly throughout the community. And it costs the taxpayers nothing. And it costs the government nothing. People will do that freely on their own. It's that and parking ratios is too much land and too much parking is making housing too expensive.
Again, we're talking to George Cruz. He's a Republican County Commissioner from Manatee County. We're talking about the issues of growth and housing. You wrote... it's so interesting. You know, we've had the YIMBY movement come up in recent years here. Obviously, going off of the NIMBY movement, of course, not my backyard. Then we've had, and I'm going back to your Substack, one of your essays, you wrote about the banana people, which is, quote, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone, or even worse, the cave people, citizens against virtually everything, who fight against anything government does, whether it's approving affordable housing, wrapping an electrical box, or building a park. You write that these groups ignore the ramifications of zero growth while creating a cottage industry of activists who oppose any development, regardless of location or merit, without ever presenting thoughtful alternatives. Every election, they're the ones asking the candidates if they receive developer money, not how they want development done. For them, the only acceptable answer is zero development, and they don't understand how this path harms their own quality of life. So that's pretty judgmental, George, going off on the activists who are concerned about this. But I guess the point is, and I think I've heard this, because we keep on hearing, again, whether it's 800 people, 900 people moving to Florida every day. Maybe it's lower than that now. Maybe people are moving out because of the hurricanes and the cost of living here. But nevertheless, right, after we're all gone from here on this planet, people are going to be still moving to Florida if it's around in terms of like climate change because of, the things that make it more interesting or, livable compared to the Northeast, the Midwest, what have you, weather-wise. So we're going to have people moving here all the time, and you can only, hold off on some of that development. So again, I guess, your theme is always about what I hear other people say, the Sierra Club say, smart growth, smart development, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to achieve here.
Sure, but I would disagree with the premise. At one point in time in the early 1900s, everyone probably thought everyone was going to keep moving to Detroit. Endlessly, never ending. After we're dead, people are still going to be moving to Detroit. Well, they stopped. Why? Because the quality of life went down and the job opportunities dried up, and it became a declining community. I don't want Manatee County or any place in the state of Florida to be a declining community. You only get to be a declining community when people stop wanting to be there because the quality of life is less than the cost of living. And I want Manatee County, I want the entire Gulf Coast area to be a crown jewel where people want to be. I don't want to play this game where we need to put a wall up and stop people from coming, because I can do that by increasing the real estate tax millage to 10 and shutting down libraries and helping our schools get to a grade C. But that's not in the current taxpayers and residents' best interest. You should want to create a place that people want to be at. And there's a right way and a wrong way of doing it, and putting parks places, building enough schools so they're not over capacity, making sure that there's proper services, making sure that somebody can ride their bike or walk or take a golf cart to a grocery store instead of having to drive 10 miles down the road and then complaining about the very traffic that they themselves are causing because they don't have the services near them. That's the wrong way to build a community. We should be looking to the future and hoping that people are still moving here after we're dead, because that means we did something right, because we made ourselves an attractive place to live.
Commissioner Ray Roa from Creative Loafing, Tampa Bay here. I want to stay with acronyms. YIGBY, kind of embedded in the 2025, I think, Live Local amendments, kind of wants to free up religious institutions to develop affordable housing. I believe, and correct me guys if I'm wrong, that it doesn't really preempt local authority like a lot of them do. What are your thoughts on this, and how much should we be reporting on this here in the coming year?
There's two versions of it. One of them does preempt, actually. The original version of YIGBY was very flexible. It was an opt-in. Like City of St. Pete, for instance, opted in. I think only 4 municipalities did. That one only required, I believe, 10% affordable, and it left local governments the ability to structure exactly what it could look like for the religious institutions. The new version from this year, I'm not even sure if it's been signed yet, but I know it passed this year. That one effectively mimics Live Local. So it basically almost just adds religious institutions to the Live Local list in terms of acceptable zoning areas, with a few additions, like you had to have been a religious institution for, I think, 10 years before it comes into play. That one's 40% affordable at 120%. It mimics a lot of what the Live Local does. That one you can't opt into. That one's automatic. So, but I've had a lot of people. I work with a group called Stream down here, and I think it's 14 or 15 different churches that get together and they advocate for a few things, one of which is affordable housing. And a number of those churches have been wanting to build for their parishioners or just for the general public, build small, duplexes, a handful of units. And they've had some pushback on that from the public and the surrounding areas, but a lot of churches have a lot of extra land. And a lot of those churches can't get rid of that land because when it was given to them decades and decades ago, there was deed restrictions on it. So they effectively have to continue owning it. This is an opportunity to allow churches who should be and often do help the public, that's kind of their mission, have an opportunity to help the public where right now they need it more than almost anything else, which is roofs over their head and a housing crisis. So I support the concept of YIGBY. I think it's a good next step. And again, it still takes the church voluntarily doing it, and it's the church's property.
Yeah, I think they broke ground in St. Petersburg on I think Palm Lake Urban Sanctuary or something.
Yeah, Lindsay Cross, I think, was one of the people sponsoring that. Again, if you're just tuning in right now, it's 27 minutes after the hour. You're listening to The Skinny here on 88.5 FM, WMNF. I'm Mitch Perry with Ray Roa. Steve Newborn and WUSF is also here. Speaking with Manatee County Commissioner George Cruz. Commissioner, a few more for you before we let you go. Let's talk about property taxes. In fact, Blazing Golia, the CFO of the state, is going to be speaking in the Tiger Bay Club in about half an hour here in Ybor City. We know that he went to Manatee. He's been all over the state. Interestingly, not the city of Tampa, something we've always kind of wondered about in terms of like looking at what their local government spending has been like. He's been, as we all know, he's been going around, this is all seemingly priming the pump, so to speak, for a proposed constitutional amendment, which has not yet been voted on property taxes. A big debate we've heard for months and months and months, led by Governor DeSantis and CFO Ngolia. Local governments are very concerned about this. We don't even know at this point. It's almost June, and we don't have any proposal on paper yet. I don't really know what the heck the governor's doing at this point. But talk about your thoughts there representing Manatee County about what you're concerned about, what ultimately may be proposed and put on the ballot this November.
I don't think you have enough time on this radio show for me to tell you why this is a terrible idea. You could look at my Substack, though. I have a very long article on it. Here's the problem: is it's not well thought out. At the end of the day, local governments should have the ability to run themselves as local governments choose to, and if people don't want to live there, they can move someplace else. This premise that the state has to step in and fix people's problems because of quote unquote affordability is a red herring. It's not fixing affordability at all. I just had this conversation with the lieutenant governor yesterday at a roundtable. To say the guy the guy from New Jersey who retires and moves down here and buys a $10 million mansion should get his, once he becomes homesteaded, should get zero property taxes to help with affordability. But the single mom living in the apartment complex who's going to potentially see their millage increase and hence their rent increase, doesn't get to benefit from that. Shows the fallacy in their argument. I mean, there's going to be a way of fixing, of making this up. It's either going to be higher sales taxes, which is very regressive. It's going to be higher millage on non-homesteaded properties, which hits small businesses and hits renters. Or it's going to be through a lack of services and or a pay to play for all the services you get, also regressive. Or you're removing services from the very people who need those services, like shutting libraries on certain days. Well, the people getting the homestead exemptions typically don't need to go to a library to use the computer to fill out a resume or to read a periodical. It's the people that need that aren't going to benefit from it. We already have a great benefit in the state of Florida, and it's called Save Our Homes. And if you've owned your home for more than a few years, if you were a pre-COVID homeowner, then your taxes are very low. They are. Like my taxes on my house that I bought in 2008 are lower than my CDD payment. It's the new people moving here that are going to benefit. It's the renters and the new homeowner, the first time home buyers that are going to feel the pain because home prices are going to immediately go up if you eliminate that. That's how home prices work. And the demand is going to dramatically go up because everyone's going to advertise zero property taxes, just like they advertise zero impact fee or zero income taxes. More people are going to move here competing for a finite amount of homes that are going to be higher priced. Right now, the average age of a first-time home buyer in the state of Florida is 40. Right. God knows what that number is going to be if this happens. I think you're actually breaking the affordability more than you're fixing the affordability with this. They're better off giving local governments the opportunity to be more flexible with their revenue sources. Give us more opportunities on how we spend tourist development taxes. Give us the right to put an additional 1%, 2%, 3% local sales tax onto a ballot in exchange for lowering millage. Give local governments more ability in terms of certain things that you can charge for relative to fees. This is, and allow us to actually charge impact fees that are necessary so we don't have to go out and bond infrastructure and then charge the local taxpayers for the debt service on those bonds to cover the cost of growth. There are things they can do, and they can do that for 1, 2, 3, 5 years and see how that works before they take such an extreme measure. But that doesn't fit into the current election cycle, so they don't want to wait for any kind of proof. That's why they vetoed the $1 million to even do a study on it last year.
Yeah.
Commissioner, we've only been talking for like 25 minutes, and you kind of said it a little bit. You sound to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, like somebody who just wants to talk about policy, wants to talk about solutions and ideas and doing things. And you've alluded to even in the past your distaste for the polarization that is happening in the country and in our area, of course. You're a Republican. How many existential crises have you had? How important is it to you in 2026 to have that R next to your name? Have you thought about just being like, I don't even want to be affiliated with this polarization on both sides?
Yes, I have thought of that.
Okay, what's that thought process like? Are you close? Like, are you ready to jump off there?
Look. Nobody's ever mistaken me for the furthest right person on any board I've ever been on. I believe in what I believe in, and historically speaking, I've always been a Republican. There was a window of time I was an independent because I fundamentally disagreed back in 2008 with all the bailouts. I don't think government should pick winners and losers, and both sides were talking about it during the McCain-Obama debate, so I dropped out of both parties. Maybe this is the time I do it again. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I think 95% of what affects people's lives are not, or at least should not, be partisan, but they become partisan. I disagree with that. I think there are better things. When I ran in 2024, I had according to supervisor elections, I think over 3,000 people switched their party affiliations just to vote for me because of the closed primaries. I had other groups like the Forward Party and others helping me on my campaign. I try to keep myself nonpartisan when it comes to the general stuff we do, from housing to animal welfare to nonprofit funding. That's why I got attacked so hard in 2024 because I voted against the quote unquote party line on a number of things because I voted the way that the citizens would want me to vote and how I believe we should be voting.
George, before I ask you this next question, I think we have a caller who was going to ask it as well. So this is regarding what we talked about last week with the USF Manatee Sarasota campus. David from Tampa. David, good morning.
Oh, yes. Hi. Thanks for having the guest on today. I was just curious about what his take is on, potentially losing a big kind of economic driver there, the USF Sarasota Manatee campus, and that getting absorbed into New College, which is a shadow of its former self as a person who went to New College. and just wondering what he thinks about that New College takeover, too, because, the staff of excellence have definitely gone down since they remade the college into athletics.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not happy with it.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely, David. Thank you for the question. That's right in your ballpark down there, George. What are your thoughts there? We should say, by the way, there was a vote this week on that, on a budget issue, and several lawmakers in the area voted for that. Only James Buchanan and Will Robinson voted against that transfer. Anyway, your thoughts?
I didn't even know this was a call-in show. Look, I think it's a terrible idea. Admittedly, I'm a little biased. My son's a freshman at USF on the Tampa campus, not here. But what we get from USF transcends the economic benefits to it. I understand people are an economic driver, and it is. But what we also get is we get the prestige of USF. We get the advocacy of USF. You look around Manatee County, that's a pride of Manatee County around here. They sit on the Sarasota and the Manatee Economic Development Councils. They sit on our Chamber of Commerce boards. They host events for us endlessly. They go up to Tallahassee. We just had our first Manatee Days up in Tallahassee, and USF was there representing. We lose that. We lose the foothold on a major, 50,000 student university by having them leave. We fall out of their universe of influence. That's the bigger thing. I don't think people understand how much benefit we get from simply having USF have a footprint here, and therefore USF having a vested interest in Manatee and Sarasota counties. I think that's way bigger than the economic side of it. And to just shove them aside after all the relationships that we've formed here with USF and say, we don't need you anymore, let's put all of our eggs in this other basket over here, is incredibly short-sighted. And it's clearly being done solely for political reasons, which again is what really upsets people. Nobody's ever sat down and explained why this makes sense other than we can do what we want. That's the answer to almost everything. And so I am fundamentally against this. I went to an event last year when this was coming up over at Anna Marie Oyster Bar to work with people against this. I've talked to other people up in Tallahassee saying I was against it, and I'll always be against it. I think it's a terrible idea. And
last question for you, and we mentioned this earlier with Blaise Ngoglia being in town here. We should say Blaise Ngoglia did come to Manatee County, and I believe he said that in his FAFO/Doge efforts that the county had spent $112 million more than it reasonably should have over the last 5 years or so. What was your response to that?
My response has been and will continue to be, please show me the report. I'm in finance as my other job. I like numbers. I'll happily stay up all night long and review that report that he put together that did it. Unfortunately, there is no report that was put together because it's a very simple. They used like one sheet of an Excel and they multiplied one number by another number and said 112 million. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And the whole fallacy of all of the places, not just Manatee, is it's not factoring in property taxes. It's looking at all the revenue streams. And that's what people are missing is they're saying this is what your budget was, this is what it is, but that budget includes infrastructure, includes utilities. So the revenue includes sales taxes, it includes ARP funds from the federal government, it includes everything. So you can't say we're 112 million over. Our taxes are only 400 total. You're telling me that we overspent by $112 million on $400 million of taxes? 180 million of that's the sheriff. Like we only have like $200 million left for the entirety of the government. You can't tell me that 112 of that was excess spending. It's factually incorrect numbers. It sounds good and it's going to look really good on people's flyers, but it's not factual. And if it is factual, then I will stand corrected and I will publicly come on your radio show and every place else and apologize for misspeaking once I get a copy of the report showing me exactly how that number was calculated.
Yeah. There's a lot to say about that FAFO Doge audits, but we'll leave it there. Manatee County Commissioner George Crews, great to have you on the show. Hope to have you again on sometime soon. Hopefully you get here in the studio. And thanks for joining us here on The Skinny.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All righty. Okay. Now, thank you. And I think
it is going to be interesting to see how Blaise responds to those questions at Tiger Bay today. If he'll tread any new territory or just keep going back to the old
He's very
hits.
fierce. Blaise Ngoglia used to be the Republican Party of Florida chairman before he simultaneously in the legislature. And he's definitely, he's known also as being one of Ron DeSantis's, close allies because we know the governor doesn't really have a lot. So he's a bulldog, New York City native. That'll be really interesting. Okay. Steve, good morning. Thank you for patiently hanging out here.
Hold on, can you say your name again?
Yeah, let's get that name again with the microphone fully on you.
Hi, I'm Steve Newborn, WUSF Public Radio.
Okay, so Steve, let's get to this front here. So Steve Newborn has been a reporter in the Tampa Bay area not since the 90s, but from the 80s. From, I believe it was 1987 you began the Tampa Tribune.
You've been reading my bio, right? Can you remember the 80s? If you do, you may not have actually been there.
You've been at USF since 2001. I remember knowing you even then when that just happened. That was, and here you are, 25 years later. What a long, strange journey it's been for you.
Indeed.
Yeah. So you were asking me, like, you were like cynical, like why do you want to talk about it? Dude, I think it's just really great that you've been, doing this, and I really wanted to have you on here and just talk about a little bit about you, because a lot of people listen to you.
Sorry, I know you like journalists don't want to be the story here, but it is.
Well, we're flies on the wall, right? We have our ears open and our mouths shut most of the time, but in this case, I'll open it for you. If you
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, the Tribune, you were originally from New York. You were telling us before the show, but you came to USF.
Another New York native, just like Blaze, right?
Yeah. USF, and then were you a journalism major, or what were you doing?
I was a journalism major, yeah. I came down to USF and took a look at my first palm tree and said, I am not going back up north. So we just had a major blizzard there the year before, and I'm like, I have pledged never to shovel a driveway again, and I have kept that promise.
Yeah. So the Tribune for 15 years. And then
about a dozen years.
Yeah. And then USF.
We're right around the anniversary of the Tribune shutting down. By the way, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, maybe.
The
Did
alumni.
you guys get together?
The alumni that had a couple of get-togethers at some of the local watering holes, and there's a lot of beer and wine flowing, and a lot of tears flowing, and a lot of people. The Trib was a kind of an upstart, is the way we looked at it, against the big bad St. Petersburg Times at that time. And, spunky people, we broke a lot of stories. We didn't have nearly the resources the Times did, but, we beat them a lot of times. So a lot of pride.
Yeah. The Tribune was the paper I read at my house and as a child. I mean, I remember getting that paper and just reading it all the time and having various degrees of reactions to the columns I was reading. I'm curious, at these gatherings, this far away from it, I think it's been...
It's been 10 years.
10 years, right?
Now,
Yeah,
right.
10 years. What is the temperature like in that group? Like, is it still kind of the same? And what's it like after like 4 beers?
Well, I hate to say this, but there's still a lot of bad feelings to the Times, especially the Times.
Paul Tash.
Yeah. You might say that, right?
Former publisher, yeah.
Sure,
Right.
and I talked. Keep going. I want to hear about this.
I mean, that's it. There's just a lot of hard feelings. The wish at the time was that they didn't have to close it down, right? They bought the attributes of the Tribune, the morgue, the library, they called it there, and the wish was we could have stayed on as a digital only paper. I was gone by this time,
right?
But if they could have stayed on as a digital, it could have been a real good source of information, particularly for the Tampa Hillsborough community, which I think still gets short shrift in some circles. You don't see the Tampa coverage that you have seen in the past. So it would have helped, they believe, right?
Yeah. Now, let's talk about your current. You've been at USF, like I say, for decades now. USF News is really fascinating. You've got, I think it really changed a lot for actually MNF a bit too, because we didn't have the competition back before 2012. Was it when USF went full news and public information? Right, you did jazz, was it different music and a lot in the daytime.
Yeah,
hours.
we had classical music in the daytime, jazz at night.
Yeah, and that was and a lot of city communities have two like public radio stations, and you'd get like maybe music on one, and you get the news and information, but that became so powerful. And I believe it was when Joanne Uralski was there, and I remember writing about it at Creative Loafing because it was like a big development media-wise that USF was now going full public news and information all day long. And us people, at MNF, although I guess it was no longer staffing here, I know MNF people were concerned because the late Rob Laura, I know he was talking about the fact that there wasn't a lot of competition for covering local stuff because USF, which is this big, great asset, but yet they weren't doing what you guys are doing now. I was actually a guest on Florida Matters this week with Matthew Petty, and he does that now 4 days a week, and that's outstanding that people have that opportunity to get more local from our, and that's the motto now, right? Local. That's what you talk about.
And you have Julio Ochoa over there, a local person that's been around forever, Creative Loafing alumni, I think. So driving the bus over there.
Julio's my boss. He's a great bus driver.
Yeah, he's awesome. And, he talks about a lot WSF is in this great position, and same with WMNF. They don't have to play these page view games necessarily, the audience games. They seem to be a little bit outside, and I know that's not like totally true. Right? You have to do that.
Also, right.
But there is something to be said about a news outlet that doesn't have to necessarily worry about getting subscriptions. You guys are a non-paywalled site. Like what is that like to be able? You've never had to waver from that, right? You come from the time of the Tribune when you could access it. Sure, you had, but you could read TBO.com whenever we wanted. How great has that been for you, and how lucky do you feel to not have to kind of think about that?
Yeah, we're real lucky. That's the reason why I've been there for so long. I mean, there's not too many public radio positions out there. And I have been fortunate to cover so many issues of importance. And, we didn't worry about the clicks or, how many people are liking us or whatever. We use our own judgment whether we think the story is worth covering, right? And I know you all do that too. So it's something that has kept me there for all these years. And, even when I'm gone, they're going to be doing that too. So, I'm just very fortunate to be where I have been for so long.
If you're just tuning in, those are the dulcet tones of Steve Newborn from WSF 89.7, a news reporter, veteran news reporter who's joining us here on 88.5 FM. If you want to come in and say hi to Steve, we got the open lines here, 813-239-9663. Steve, we just had an email here, or text message, actually, I guess it was, and the person says, hey, Steve Newborn is really awesome. I always appreciate his calm, steady voice and excellent reporting. So you got a fan out there, man.
To riff off of Bubba, there's something really special about a reporter that's been around for so long. Can you talk about trust building and how much you think about it and what it feels like after you've worked in the community for this long, and how precarious and fragile you think it is still?
Yeah. Well, you build up all these sources and all these connections in the community. I've been primarily an environmental reporter,
right.
So I have pretty good tentacles into that community. Just some wonderful, wonderful people I've gotten to know over the years. So.
And by the way, can we just say, because, a classic NPR thing, which I tried to incorporate after I went to a Poynter Institute seminar for a week back 20 years ago and brought it back to MNF.
You can afford those things.
I got a scholarship, actually.
Oh, there you go.
That's the only reason I got to go, was, though, is the sound, with the classic NPR sound, and you do a great job of that on your environmental stories and making you feel like you're right out there with you on the boat or wherever you're going to, talking about all the different things you talk about.
Yeah, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of what I did. When I switched over from the Trib, I was a print guy for most of my life, and I'm wondering, do I have the chops? Do I know anything about this? Am I going to be any good? And one of the first stories I did after I got hired, I happened to get called to cover a presidential visit down in Sarasota. Now, anybody who knows the inside skinny on journalism is, it's kind of the short straw, right? You go to these events with the president, you can't interview anybody, you get spoon-fed everything, you're in the back with the herd, right? So this just happened to be at a middle school or it was an elementary school in Sarasota, and it was September 11th, 2001. And I got to cover George W. Bush's speech, the whole Little Red Pony and all that. And I got to witness history.
So you saw when Andy Card went and whispered in his ear?
Well, that was actually in another room.
Okay.
He came in afterwards, and it's funny, after George Bush gave his little, 30-second spiel and then went off on the jet plane to his hidden bunker somewhere, we're all crowded around this little room watching the one TV. This is back in 2001, right? So people didn't have smartphones. So we're all watching this one little TV on a cart in the AV room of this elementary school, watching the Twin Towers fall one by one. It was surreal, and the drive home, I'm like thinking we're going to get hit by a nuclear bomb or something. It's just wild. So some of the stuff I got to see is just really amazing.
Right. And I was looking at your bio, talking about other things that you've covered, which I've been around for covering too. You talked about the Terry Schiavo, that whole classic, the feeding tube.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure you did a lot of stories for NPR on that. Then, of course, we had the terrorism trial of Sami Al-Arian. Mm-hmm. That was huge. And then also Deepwater Horizon in 2010. And then you followed the Florida Wildlife Corridor expedition as they walked and paddled throughout the state. Twice you did that.
That's right. Yeah. Pretty wild. I got to see parts of the state I didn't know even existed. 2 1,000-mile trips. I got to kind of parachute in and went up to the Panhandle a lot for the second trip, seeing some just gorgeous places that I didn't know existed. Here I am, an environmental reporter, and going up to like Blackwater Creek and some of those areas up there was just really opened my eyes to the natural beauty of this state and how fragile it is and how much it really needs to be protected. And our role in doing that, it's pretty important.
Yeah, I was curious about that. In journalism, we're just asked over and over again to be objective, fair, balanced, and then neutrality is personally the one I kind of tend to have a harder time with. Right. As an environmental reporter and somebody who just gets dropped into these places and then your whole world changes because you see this and then you're covering it in such depth that there are certain undeniable things about the environment and the challenges that it faces. How do you stay neutral when you report on these things?
Yeah, that's the thing about journalism, right? We have to be objective. We have to kind of give both sides of the story. But I tell you, when I went on this wildlife corridor trip, for instance, just seeing the incredible natural beauty that is threatened, I become really an advocate for it, in subtle ways, right? I do. Well, what's the other side of the story for this? We're going to go pave over paradise, right? It's not really one of those if or but stories, but we do become advocates for what we believe in, and that's part of the thing that keeps us going so long, right?
Yeah, you got to actually have that. I think it's important not just to be. I was thinking about this too. Actually, I was listening to Craig Pittman's podcast and the partner he has. I forget the man's name now. Chad, I believe it is. Anyway, because they were at the Tombolo Books last Thursday, and he was talking about, by the way, Amy Goodman was saying, I think, to an interview that Amy Goodman, who, of course, as we all know, is a very passionate advocacy journalist. I think it's a fair comment, but there's something to be said for that. And I try to remind myself of that as well in terms of trying to be, as neutral and objective as possible, but also to have a reason why you're doing the story. And it's not just to give play-by-play. There's real things that are going on here that we need to bring our energy to as reporters. We do have a call. Okay, let's see. And I think DeAndre called earlier, so I'm sorry we didn't get to him. DeAndre, you're on MNF. Good morning. Wait, I'm sorry. Did I hit that? Hello?
DeAndre, are you there? We haven't heard from DeAndre in a while,
it's
too.
Weird. I'm sorry, folks. It's kind of
Steve, while he's queuing that up to stay on the wildlife corridor, what a great project and thing that happened. We had Carlton Ward in here.
Oh, fantastic.
At one point, it's amazing to talk to somebody like that and enlightening because you're looking at a person who sacrificed a lot of time with his family to do this work. I always think about this in the corridor. It is like this cattle land that belongs to cattlemen, some would argue, America's first cowboys, right? Should we be concerned about that land getting turned over, or should we be more or less celebrating kind of the win that the corridor is? Because it's not protected forever, right?
Well, it's a win in certain respects, right? So these guys, these three explorers, for lack of a better term, expeditioners, I guess I should say, they were responsible for getting the wildlife corridor legislation enshrined in state law. So it's a priority to preserve this corridor from the Everglades up. It kind of does two spokes, one to the Panhandle, one up
incredible tract of land.
Right, but so much of it is at risk still. There's no victories yet. It's minor victories.
The surrounding areas.
It's the base. And if you even look at the state budget right now, the governor had proposed either 100 or 150 million for Florida forever.
Yes, he did.
The state
but
line
the legislature is not funding it at all.
Right. Yeah. But they're not funding it at all.
Yeah.
So, so where does that money go, right? Most of the money is going for the agricultural lands that preserve. Right. They call them conservation easements, which kind of pays ranchers and grove owners not to develop their land.
But you can't really visit those areas. Right? I mean,
you could. You would probably something would happen to you.
Oh, by the way, I think DeAndre, are you there with us now?
Yes. Hello. Good morning. I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Go ahead.
I have a question. I've seen so many documentaries actually on the Tampa Bay area, and I overheard the one something about the springs. Did you work on the one? And I should have just Googled this, but did you work on any of those where I guess a dive team went up the spine of the state underground in the spring? Check that out. Or am I mistaken?
Are you referring to deep injection wells or springs protection?
Springs, survey protection, yes.
Oh, protecting the springs, yeah. That's another big issue. I went to Weeki Wachee last summer, and the amount of algae in the water, it used to be crystal clear. I mean, you could. in places like Crystal River as well, where the manatees are known to go in the wintertime. You go up there now.
Thinking out loud, and yes, so many are being devastated. And I apologize. I'll take the answer off. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you talk to some of the old timers there, and they can tell you how crystal clear the water was. You could see down, 50 feet, and you go there now, and you have these huge green clumps of algae. The algae is killing the seagrass, which the manatees and marine fish need to grow. We had this huge die-off of manatees in Indian River Lagoon a couple of years ago. Like over 1,000 died. It was amazing. This is a threatened species, and there are moves to preserve the watersheds, but this entails a lot of money because the main thing is septic tanks have to be hooked up to central sewer systems, which costs a lot of money. And, good luck getting a lot of that money from the state legislature. So it's another ongoing battle.
We just have a couple of minutes left with Steve Newborn. Steve, we know you're going to be going later this afternoon. The Rays are having a presser this afternoon. Big development last night. I guess the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, is now in the hands of the county commission and the city council to deal with next week. But I guess like all of us in the media, we've been following this saga for 19 years now.
Seems like a curse, like it's never going to end.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about where we're at right now with this situation with the new owners here?
Yeah, so this is a big deal. This MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, the Rays are getting smart. I mean, they lowered the amount they're asking from the public below $1.1 billion to $976 million, which still sounds like a lot of money, but I mean, it shows that they're flexible, that they're willing to work with the city and the county, which means a lot because the previous ownership, they were perceived as kind of stubborn.
Right.
That word.
That's a kind word for them.
So I think this is a big deal, and we're going to hear a lot next week. There's a lot of opposition to this from people who think...
We heard it earlier this morning on NF, actually.
Right, yeah. We shouldn't be financing billionaires and that sort of thing versus the income that's going to be generated from this major development.
According to certain reports commissioned by the team.
Right. So, the yin and the yang there of who you talk to. So I think the odds of this happening just went up significantly.
Yeah, I think I tracked. You were also at Cafe Con Tampa when Ken Babby was there, and I chased him outside.
One of the Rays' new owners.
And I asked him to talk to, while an MOU is non-binding, it can be quite binding in a lot of ways, and he wasn't ready to comment on that.
For Tallahassee, it is, right? As we mentioned, originally a $50 million request. Now they want $150 million from the state for Hillsborough College, which is, we still don't know if that's going to happen up there, but the Rays owners believe that they need that MOU to show the legislators up there that it's on pace, whether this happens or not.
Yeah, that's the big time crunch right now. That's why Ken Babby is pushing this so hard, because the legislators are up there now.
Right.
They have a deadline of June 1st to come up with a new budget, and they really want that money to relocate the college and put in new infrastructure, roads and such, and it probably won't work without it. So, and the thing to remember is this is really being pushed hard by Governor DeSantis, and he's gone after this year.
And we saw, by the way...
How much are we going to see him put his thumb on this hardcore if it doesn't get going?
Well, he also said the other day, like, he boasted about how Orlando, this is, going to go and basically go straight to Orlando if this doesn't happen. I do think that, again, that's the classic pressure points. Yeah. And that's the only place I see this thing ever going if it doesn't stay in Tampa.
Yeah, it's pretty. I'll talk about. We still have 2 minutes. We'll talk about the Rays, a little bit more. I was with somebody yesterday who's affiliated with the college, and again, we landed back at this place. A lot of people just aren't talking about the students, the transient nature of every administrator and decision maker on a college. There are long time faculty, adjunct, and such who are there forever in this long term thing, and they're watching these administrators come in for 1-2 years and just move through, and they're making these huge decisions about students and a student body and a community. And it is the weird thing. I talked about it last week. Baseball, it's this long season. We have no statistical mistakes or anomalies, right? Yet here we are just rushing through this thing,
Yeah, and you mentioned the students. I mean, where are they going to go to school in portables, right? They're going to bulldoze the whole
Are we
college.
going to COVID this thing again? Just be online everywhere? Like, what about the performance students? Like, so I don't know. Steve Newborn in the studio with us today. It is not the Twilight. Can you say your name one more time?
Hi, I'm Steve Newborn, WUSF Public Radio.
I just want to say also, it's a lot of fun to see Mitch talk to Steve, because I think I look at Mitch all the time the way Mitch is looking at Steve. Like, great admiration. Thank you for serving this community so much. Thank you so much to Manatee Commissioner Cruz for coming on at the top of the show. I know Mitch is going to jet to Tampa, Tiger Bay.
But also, I won't be here next week. Memorial
That's
Day
right.
weekend, I'll be down at California.
We're going to fly solo here today,
Yeah.
right, Skip? Or no, Skip's out too. I think DT will run the board for us next week. Skip Sassy, thank you so much for running the boards for us. Anthony Madura on the phones. I do see Joellen Shoki in Studio One with Art in your ear. She's the hostess who loves you the mostest. And this is WMNF Tampa.